You're a human, and like every human before you, you want to feel different than you currently feel. Maybe happier, maybe calmer. Maybe like you're melting into the cosmic fabric of existence while a tree tells you its secrets. That desire is ancient, and it basically invented drugs. This is the entire history of drugs, from cavemen eating weird mushrooms to your cousin selling Adderall in a Wendy's parking lot. Prehistory. When we first got high, let's start 10,000 years ago. Humans are still figuring out farming, but somehow they've already discovered psychedelic mushrooms. Archaeologists found cave paintings in Algeria showing people holding mushrooms with little wavy lines coming off them. That's ancient, for I'm tripping right now. Early drug use was mostly spiritual. Shamans would eat plants, see visions, and tell everyone what the gods wanted. Sometimes the gods wanted rain. Sometimes the gods wanted a sacrifice. Sometimes the gods wanted everyone to dance for 6 hours straight. Depends on the mushroom. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia around 3400 BC, people discovered opium poppies. They called it hulgil, which translates to joy plant. That's adorable. That's also the plant that would eventually create heroin, fentanyl, and the entire opioid crisis. But we'll get there. Over in South America, people were chewing coca leaves for energy. It's like ancient Red Bull, except it grows on a bush and eventually becomes cocaine. Workers chewed it to labor longer. Messengers chewed it to run faster. It's been used continuously for over 3,000 years. Cannabis shows up in Central Asia around 2500 BC. The Scythians would throw it on hot stones in enclosed tents and hotbox themselves. Herodotus wrote about it. He said they'd howl with pleasure. The first documented stoner circle. Kava appeared in the Pacific Islands. Betel nut in Southeast Asia, which is still chewed by 600 million people today. Peyote in Mexico among indigenous tribes. Every culture found something to alter their consciousness with. It's almost like humans are hardwired to want an escape hatch from reality. But the oldest drug, alcohol. Someone left fruit juice out too long, it fermented, they drank it, they felt funny, and humanity was like, we should do this on purpose. Alcohol has been with us ever since. Through every war, every empire, every bad decision at a wedding reception. Archaeological evidence suggests we were brewing beer before we were baking bread. Priorities. Ancient civilizations. Getting sophisticated. Fast forward to ancient Greece. Philosophers are drinking wine and debating the meaning of existence. Plato wrote about symposiums, which were basically wine parties with intellectual conversation. Socrates could allegedly drink everyone under the table and still ask annoying questions about virtue. The Greeks also had something called kykeon, a barley drink used in religious ceremonies that may have contained psychedelic ergot fungus. Some historians think the famous Eleusinian Mysteries, a secret religious ritual, involved getting absolutely blasted on psychedelics. Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates all participated. We'll never know exactly what happened because participants were sworn to secrecy, under penalty of death. The Romans took opium trade seriously. They shipped it across the empire and used it for medicine, recreation, and probably dealing with the stress of constant gladiator scheduling. Roman physicians prescribed it for everything from insomnia to diarrhea to surgery. In China, cannabis was being used medicinally by 2700 BC. The legendary Emperor Shen Nung allegedly tested hundreds of herbs on himself and recorded their effects. He recommended cannabis for gout, rheumatism, and absent-mindedness. Ancient Egypt was basically a pharmaceutical wonderland. The Ebers Papyrus from 1550 BC is an ancient medical textbook that recommends opium for crying children. Yes, they drugged babies. Parenting was different back then. They also used cannabis and possibly blue lotus for pain and rituals. In the Amazon, indigenous tribes were brewing ayahuasca, a psychedelic tea made by combining two plants, neither of which does anything on its own. How they figured out that specific combination out of 80,000 plant species in the Amazon is one of history's great mysteries. The brew makes you vomit, hallucinate, and allegedly meet your ancestors. Still popular today, but now it costs $3,000 at a retreat center in Costa Rica. Hindu texts mention a mysterious drink called soma that gave strength, immortality, and visions. No one actually knows what soma was. Could be a mushroom, could be cannabis, could be ephedra, could be a plant that doesn't exist anymore. The recipe is lost to history, which is probably for the best. And somewhere around 850 AD, a goat herder in Ethiopia noticed his goats were acting weird after eating certain berries. He tried them himself and felt energized. That's coffee, the first stimulant that wouldn't eventually land you in prison. Coffee spread to the Arab world, where Sufi monks used it to stay awake for nighttime prayers. Coffee houses became centers of intellectual life. Some historians credit coffee with kickstarting the Enlightenment because everyone suddenly had the energy to think. Middle Ages. Distillation and global trade. During the Islamic Golden Age, Arab scholars invented distillation. Ironic, since alcohol is forbidden in Islam. But they were trying to make perfumes and medicines. What they accidentally created was the ability to make drinks way stronger. Thanks to distillation, we went from wine to whiskey, from beer to brandy. The word alcohol itself comes from Arabic, al-kul. Hashish spread through the Middle East. One legend says a group called the Assassins used it before missions, which is where we get the word assassin. Probably not true, but it's a great story. What's definitely true is that hashish was popular enough that sultans kept trying to ban it. Then Europeans showed up in the Americas, and everything changed. Indigenous Americans had been using tobacco for centuries in ceremonies and medicine. Europeans looked at it and thought, what if we did this constantly for no spiritual reason, just because? By the 1600s, tobacco was so valuable it was used as currency in Virginia. People paid their taxes in tobacco. They bought wives with tobacco. The cash crop that built colonial America was an addictive drug. Europeans also found coca leaves in South America and brought samples back, and coffee from the Middle East, and tea from China. Suddenly Europe had access to stimulants from 3 different continents. Chocolate came over too, which contains theobromine, a mild stimulant. Everyone was getting caffeinated. The global drug trade had officially begun. Empires would rise and fall based on who controlled what substances. The 1800s. When drugs were in everything, okay, now things get wild. The 1800s are when scientists learned to isolate the active ingredients in plants. This changed everything. In 1804, a German pharmacist named Friedrich Serturner extracted morphine from opium. He named it after Morpheus, the Greek god of dreams. It killed pain like nothing else. It was a miracle. It was also devastatingly addictive, but they wouldn't figure that out for a while. The invention of the hypodermic needle in the 1850s made things worse because injecting morphine hits faster and harder. The Civil War created thousands of morphine addicts. They called it soldier's disease. In 1855, cocaine was isolated from coca leaves. Doctors loved it. They used it for toothaches, depression, and surgery. It was the first effective local anesthetic. Suddenly, dentists could pull teeth without making you scream. Sigmund Freud was obsessed with cocaine. He wrote papers about how great it was. He gave it to his friends, his patients, himself. He recommended it for morphine addiction, depression, and fatigue. He was basically cocaine's hype man for years before admitting, maybe this stuff is a little too good. His friend and patient ended up addicted and paranoid, injecting himself daily. Oops. Coca-Cola launched in 1886 with actual coca leaf extract in it. The inventor, a morphine addict, marketed it as a cure for headaches and exhaustion. The cocaine was removed in 1903 after concerns about addiction, but the name stayed. Pepsi never had cocaine, which is why Coca-Cola won. In 1898, Bayer Pharmaceutical Company invented a new drug. They called it heroin because it made you feel heroic. They marketed it as a non-addictive cough suppressant. That's right. Heroin was sold as a safe alternative to morphine. This is like marketing a chainsaw as a safe alternative to scissors. Bayer sold it until 1913. Meanwhile, laudanum, which is opium dissolved in alcohol, was everywhere. You could buy it at any pharmacy without a prescription. Doctors gave it to women for hysteria, which was the medical term for any female emotion they didn't understand. Parents gave it to babies for teething. Soothing syrups for infants contained morphine. Victorian England was basically sedated. And for fun, people threw ether parties. You'd inhale ether and pass out briefly. It was like the vape pens of the 1840s, except you could actually die. Chloroform parties too? Recreational anesthesia was a whole thing. The 1800s treated drugs like candy. No regulations, no prescriptions, just pure chaos in a bottle. Sears Roebuck catalogs sold heroin kits. Patent medicines contained cocaine, morphine, and alcohol in random combinations. Nobody had to list the ingredients.